and on our website you can watch his videos. This whatever I've just shown you, this is part of our project at INATS. INATS, I'm assistant professor there, and Nilesh ji is also the faculty there. And we have our project named Chronology, Markers, and the History of Indian Heritage. We are working on that. And in that project only, this is part of that, the presentation is part of that project only. You can talk with him, you can call, you can share your views. Thank you.
In astrology, they say Mercury is the youngest, but the most wise. I can't say anything more than that. Well done.
Thank you.
I think this, the date arrived at least cannot tally, because the other references have not been quoted. It cannot tally with the Bhishma Nirvana on Magh Shukla Ashtami. You know, in 3001 itself, the Ainansha will be to the tune of what, 46 degrees, Mr. Bhatnagar would agree with me. Taking further 2000 years back would add another 25 degrees. That would mean the Ainansha would be more than 50 degrees. And Ainansha more than 50 degree means the Nirayan longitude of the sun on the Uttarayan day would be around 270 plus 50. That is 320. So the Uttarayan would occur somewhere in the end of Falguna or Chaitra. So it can't obtain. You can do it either by simulation or by the Sur Siddhanta. It is just not possible according to me.
Just 1 minute. Just to add to her, whatever she has said, in case you add to that, the movement of Saptarishis, the slowest movement is 100 years. And how they moved from Maghat to Purvasarha, if that is also taken into account, her dates will be totally accurate.
No, actually, you should have presented a little more about how you have arrived at those dates. You have presented all the results. Fine.
It is already there in books.
Yeah, no, but the...
Okay, I think he left our speaker, Mr. Jaideep.
I just wanted to convey some bad news to you. Unfortunately, Alf Hilterbeidel, whom all of you know, is a Mahabharata scholar, he's done some outstanding work on Draupadi. And he's done work on Aravan, you saw earlier, the cult of Draupadi in Tamil Nadu. And he will not be with us today. And he's very sick, and so he will not be able to come to any conference from here on. So he sent his paper, which I was supposed to read, but I'm exhausted and jet-lagged and I cannot see properly. So the next generation, which is Joydeep, will read the paper and you can see how the torch is being passed. Today it's Alf, tomorrow it'll be me. Okay, hold on.
And he speaks more authority, I've seen.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I was just handed this paper today and asked to read it, so I sat outside and read it 3 times so I would not make mistakes. But it is a 20-page paper and there's no way I can read it in the short time. So after reviewing all of Al's various theses and different parts of the paper, I think this is the core, and it's about 2.5, 3 pages. And I will read it as fast as possible. Yeah. So the setup for the paper is that Freud in Moses and Monotheism talks about religion as a response to a trauma. So when there is a trauma to a people, then they repress that trauma and it returns in the form of their religious convictions. And the example Moses gives is of Jewish religion, that the trauma returns in the form of its monotheism. That's why the book is called Moses and Monotheism. So much for Al's setup of the problem. Now he's going to argue that there is a similar trauma for Hinduism and the Mahabharata, that the Mahabharata and Hinduism arose as traumas to certain experiences that Indians had or Hindus had, but you can't call them Hindus because they weren't Hindus until this trauma happened. So I will read as fast as possible. Can we posit trauma behind the Mahabharata and Hinduism? I have suggested that the Mahabharata's central myth of the unburdening of the earth points to a traumatic response by an ideally rural Brahmanism to India's second urbanization, which began about the 7th century BCE, long after the cities of the Indus Valley were destroyed by 1700 BCE, and reached its high water mark with the rise of the heterodoxies, particularly Buddhism and Jainism, which grew along with this urbanization and, unlike Brahmanism, benefited from it. By the 2nd century BC, when the Mahabharata was probably composed, one finds the text making numerous reflections on the rise of cities. For instance, a gleaner's tale tells us that way back in the Krita Yuga, the Saraswati River once changed course and turned back to face eastward for a stretch to create bowers that would accommodate the rishis who crowded her southern bank, giving them relief from the citified conditions that beset them. More occurrent with the rise of real urban conditions was a Janapada nostalgia that projected a preference for an intermediate stage in which a limited number of kingdoms, typically the 16 Janapadas or footholds of the people, would have organized the landscape of North India, each with a royal city that could be kept in the epic poets' imaginations to adaptable Brahmanical norms. But while life in the capitals could go on under these modified norms, the text repeatedly returns to the ideal of the strict and the good life of those who still cultivate a rural forest life and eschewed the new mixed caste dharmas of Brahmins who had adapted to the proliferation of confused urban occupations with the rise of cities. The apocalyptic violence of the unburdening of the earth myth, with its implicit depopulation of cities, explicit in the case of Dwaraka, which everyone flees before it is flooded, would, I argue, be a reflection upon the latency of the trauma undergone during the early years of urbanization. Now, I could read more of the thing, but that is really the core of his argument. And to summarize what the conclusions he draws is, again, he returns to Freud and Moses and monotheism, and says just as the killing of Moses prompted the return of the repressed in the form of monotheism, in India, this destruction of the rural Brahmanical way of life, which was not geared towards urbanization, which did not like living in cities, which had negative attitudes towards cities, and the rise of these cities, especially in Magadha, the rise of Buddhism and the rise of Jainism, is what prompts Brahmanism to return through this trauma. The return of the repressed is in the form of Hinduism, and that Hinduism is created through the Mahabharata. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaydeep. I think it's already 7, and they say, Chudhat Rodam Balan Buddhi. After full day, one wants to go home. There is no Balan Buddhi left out for further speeches.
Thank you very much. I just have to make one announcement for tomorrow. The academic session 7, chaired by Dr. Mani, will now become academic session that follows. So the session is exchanged with the session which Meenakshi Jain is chairing. So Meenakshi Jain's session will start at 9:30. Dr. Alexis Pinchand and Conrad Elst and Indrajit Bandyopadhyay, they will be on the stage at 9:30, 10:45. Next session, which Dr. Mani was to chair first, will now become the second session of the morning with Professor Sushmita Pandey, Abhay Kumar Singh and Dr. Komkar Pintia. Thank you. And I just want to remind you, resolutions tomorrow morning, either to me or to Neeraji. Thank you, Dr. Shukla. Thank you. Thank you.